Hi, I'm Ian Scott and I'm creating a brand new podcast aimed at helping individuals to identify their passion and turn it into an online business. To fulfill that goal, this podcast will include expert interviews, online business ideas you can try, tips, tools, resources and much more. What motivated me to create this podcast? Great question. As of creating this podcast, over 20.5 million people in the United States alone have become unemployed. When you consider that, it just illustrates the point that job security is a fallacy. With the current pandemic, people's lives in most nations have been turned upside down almost overnight. They're concerned, and rightly so, about their financial futures. So, how can this podcast help such individuals? One of the dangers of relying on a job is that it can sap people of their creativity and entrepreneurial spirit. It can make them reliant on someone else to provide the job, the structure, the schedule, everything that's involved in a job. And so, when a crisis hits, whether it's a pandemic like we're currently experiencing, a financial crisis or a recession, everything crumbles. To make matters worse, there's no safety net in place. People have nothing to fall back on to replace what they've just lost. So now, more than ever, it makes sense for people to start looking at creating something for themselves, a side hustle, if you will. Unfortunately, many of those who have lost their jobs probably haven't given this much thought until now. Maybe they don't know where to start or how to proceed. It could be that they have attempted something in the past and it failed, or they didn't follow through and really give things a chance. They may have even become discouraged, and when we become discouraged in times of distress, that saps our energy and weakens our motivation. WFH, the New Reality Podcast, will provide content that can inspire and spark that entrepreneurial spirit within each listener. As I mentioned earlier, the purpose of this podcast is to help individuals identify their passion and turn it into an online business. The goal is to show how anyone can turn a hobby, interest, skill, talent or passion into an online business. It just takes some imagination and creativity. Speaking of creativity, the podcast will also cover success stories of individuals who, during the present health crisis, adapted their business in order to meet the current situation. That includes adopting new ways of doing business where possible. This brand new podcast is available in both a video and audio only version. So whatever your preference is when listening to podcasts, we've got you covered. I want this podcast to reach and benefit as many people as possible. So if the mission and stated purpose of this podcast resonates with you and you feel it can provide value, please subscribe to this podcast. Share the podcast with your friends, family and colleagues. You can also follow this podcast using the social links on the podcast page. If there's something you'd like covering in this podcast, you can leave a voice message, and the topic or question will be covered in an upcoming episode. So, this is your host Ian Scott saying thank you for listening and thank you for subscribing today.